Good luck with that.
You bastard! You brought me here, come all the way to London, and now you say that, you little... Oh.
Well, no, but I think it does, I think just at the moment it feels so optimistic against what, but in the book you say things do change very quickly, and you do get to a tipping point where something like gay marriage would be, like 30 years ago people would say, oh no, I don't support that, and now nearly everyone would say they do support
These things can happen very quickly. You see, and another thing they understood, and we did not, is systems, complex systems, and the way that systems change. And it always looks impossible until it happens. And they knew that. They knew that they could tip the system. They knew that this utterly obnoxious, unpopular idea of theirs would one day win completely against the odds when it seemed completely impossible, because they knew how to tip the system from one equilibrium state to another. Society is a complex system. It follows the rules of complex systems. And what that means is that it does not change in a gradual or linear fashion. It changes in these non-linear ways. It has these emergent properties, the result of billions of random interactions forming patterns, but which, if you're clever enough, you can get in there and start to direct some of that pattern change towards a tipping point whereupon society can suddenly collapse into a new equilibrium state. This is how Keynesian social democracy happened. This is how neoliberalism happened. This, unfortunately, is now how the far right and the radical right are taking power. But it's also how we can take it back. It always seems impossible because we imagine that we can only do it in a gradual linear fashion, and we had to persuade everyone. We really do not. We just need to persuade enough. It looks from early science that it's about 25% of the population, and suddenly the system tips, partly because of the innate dynamics of a complex system, but partly because we are the uber-social mammals, with the possible exception of the naked mole rat, who are constantly twitching our whiskers to see which way the social wind is blowing. We do not want to be left behind. And again, this is something, coming back to this Democracy for Realists book, mentions, is that this fear of being left behind is a huge driver in politics. And if you sense that things have changed, you'll suddenly swing round with them, even if you don't really know what those things are. You just feel, you get this sort of this sense that there is a change in the wind, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of it. And so you'll see these very sudden social shifts. And yeah, we mentioned, gay marriage, where even David Cameron brings in marriage equality legislation because he had no choice. The world had changed. So with smoking, there's many other examples, but we can do that on the grand political scale as well as the neoliberals did.
Okay, good. Right, we have to. It's a really fascinating book, and we've covered a lot of it there. But you will have the opportunity to buy the book and read that, because it's a terrific read. Right, we'll go over to some questions. I'm just trying to. We've covered a few of these. There's someone called Stuart Lee who's getting a question.
Hello, Stuart.
He spelt Stuart differently than the other one. I don't understand his question. I'll ask Stuart Lee's question.
He's quite blunt, isn't he?
I mean, they put this in just to get. They've called themselves Stuart Lee. Where are you, Stuart? Are you in? Yeah, you're lying. Is the case for degrowth urgently needed more than ever? Is what Stuart Lee asks.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think. It's a huge mistake, almost a category error, to use growth as a political aim. And unfortunately, it seems to be the only meta aim that this government has got. First of all, it was saying change, and now it just says growth. Growth is what we're here for. And you say, well, hang on a moment. Apart from the fact that infinite growth on a finite planet is eventually impossible and destroys everything, what are you growing, and for whom? Because throughout the neoliberal era, we've seen continued growth, not as fast as during the Keynesian era, but growth has continued. But at the same time, we've seen a massive decline in the position of the poorest people in society, because a huge proportion of that growth has gone to the richest people in society. And when you are driving growth by having a third runway at Heathrow, and by ripping down environmental and planning regulations, and by basically allowing the very rich to do what the hell they want, and by claiming that AI is going to be a magic wand which changes everything, then are we looking at a growth in our prosperity, a growth in our well-being? Well, I mean, even Simon Kuznets, who was the first person to really formulate the concept of GDP growth, said it should not be used as a measure of national well-being. And what happens, everyone then uses it as a measure of national well-being. So, it's not that we necessarily need degrowth, but we need to dethrone growth. That shouldn't be our aim. We should put other things first. We should aim for improved well-being, improved genuine prosperity, improved environmental sustainability, improved public services, etc., etc. And if that leads to some growth or if it doesn't matter. Because we're getting the fundamental aims that we should be aiming for, not this subsidiary aim which might or might not be a path to those other aims, but is definitely a path to environmental catastrophe.
Okay, that's great. It is good. I'm sorry, I'm just distracted by...
You're not listening to a word I say.
I'm distracted. That's good, we sorted that. So that one's sorted out then. Good, that's answered. It's just we've covered quite a lot of stuff in all these questions. This is from an anonymous person, but this comes out of what we're talking about. How can the environmental movement be similarly strategic and scheming to achieve its goals? What can the environmentalists learn from?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things we can learn. I mean, the storytelling. Some people have been good on this. I don't want to diss everyone. In resistance politics by any means. There's some brilliant, amazing people, but we don't coordinate. And it's the same in the Green movement. I mean, in Green left movements, we're always going on about solidarity and collectivism, and we're always fighting like cats in a sack, right? The right goes endlessly on about individualism, and they're the most collectivist group in society. If someone says, the problem is school children identifying as cats, suddenly everyone is saying, the problem, in my opinion, the problem is school children identifying as cats. Yes, have you heard about these schools? It's just like they all are singing from the same hymn sheet all the time. Now, I'm not suggesting that we become mindless fuckwits like them, but we should try to agree on a few common aims and stick to them.
Yeah.
And we have been really rubbish at that.
Yes.
And we should be kinder to each other, and we should be warmer to each other and more welcoming to each other, and particularly to people who might want to get involved, but we say, oh, you're wearing leather shoes, you're not coming in.
Yeah.
There's not that much of it, but there can be a sort of exclusivity. I mean, Julia Steinberger, who I think is brilliant, professor of physics and lots of other amazing sides to her as well, she points out that, what's missing is warmth very often. On the left in particular, sometimes in green movements as well. We might be nice and welcoming, but we don't have that warmth, and I think that is a very important aspect. Whereas, you go to these conservative jamborees and they make each other feel good.
Yeah.
They say, you're great, oh, you're amazing, look at you. Can I stroke your hair? Oh, can I stroke something else? Yeah. But that's conservatives. Anyway, but we're
not meant to be doing an advert for the Conservatives.
No.
Let's go and stroke each other with the Conservatives.
But we are missing to some extent that element, and there's this cliche, but it is nonetheless true that the right looks for converts and the left looks for traitors, and we have to get past that.
Well, and I think also that the right is then able to very easily drive a wedge, because if I mean, a lot of the culture wars are just someone spotting, we can divide those two and get those fighting against each other, this issue.
Exactly.
And so we're being distracted into things I'm not saying are not important, but aren't the overall, we have much more in common. So it is sort of that exactly that we need to sort of see the common goal, which hopefully I think that the thing that I think is hopeful is that I think people are beginning to see that idea of billionaires having that much money doesn't seem very fair. Well, and I think we're getting more aware of that.
It has to be said that maybe Trump is going to smash this system for us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the optimistic way. I mean, for a start, he has revealed the system. Because a lot of what he's doing is fairly mainstream US policy. But just with the brakes taken off and without the guise of democratic legitimacy. it's not that massive, it's not qualitatively different, a lot of it, from the incredibly cruel and vicious policies we've seen in successive administrations, towards Palestinians, for example, towards asylum seekers, towards any immigrants, coming across the Mexican border. It's been horrible for decades. And now Trump is owning the horribleness.
Yeah.
He's saying, yeah, this is who we really are. And a lot of people are seeing that and thinking, maybe we shouldn't be like that anymore.
Yes. I mean, this question from Adam Laidlaw sort of touches on sort of my slight fear about this. He says, what's the answer to neoliberalism revolution? But there is the sort of feeling that, I mean, as you said, World War II created this new environment. You sort of feel, it almost feels like with the turning of history, that something awful needs to happen before something good can happen. Do you think we can do it in a peaceful way, or does it have to?
So yeah, the pessimistic view is there's a historian called Walter Scheidel wrote a very interesting book called The Great Leveller, and he said there's only 4 things which have ever radically reduced inequality in the world. One is total war, one is societal collapse, one is total and violent revolution, and one is plague. So you can take your pick. Now, it's my hope, being a perennial optimist, that we can actually learn from history, we can learn from what other political movements have done, we can learn from previous transformations, and we can do it without the help of one of those 4 forces.
Yes.
But maybe I'm off on one. But we at least have to try. And I think we can develop a science of social and political change. I mean, the neoliberals did develop that science, and they did it very successfully. And they did create their revolution without the need for any of those 4 forces. So they do sort of, in a way, refute Scheidel's thesis there, at least to some extent. And if they can do it, well, we can do it too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. All right, let's see. I'm just trying to find ones that we haven't covered already. Okay, well, shall I ask this? Yeah, let's ask it. David Fett says, do you think a positive approach to immigration sits well with your admirable sense of societal belonging?
Well, I mean, we need an approach to immigration.
Yep.
It shouldn't be the current horrible, punitive, vicious, scapegoating approach, which just uses immigrants as the football to be kicked around and to be blamed for all the things which governments are, where governments are failing.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we necessarily need to have open borders, but we can have a debate on immigration which is not informed by fascist nastiness. And unfortunately, that's the only debate we've got at the moment. Yeah. And one of the most heartbreaking things of all from this government, and it wasn't that I was vesting huge hope in it, I was just bloody relieved to get rid of the Tories, but one of the most heartbreaking things is when they adopted Reform's colours and branding, Reform's actual language, and Reform's policies to say, we're going to be just as hard on asylum seekers, on people coming in small boats as Reform are. It's utterly disgusting, but also it's just really bad politics. Yeah. There's a whole tranche of research showing that all you do when you do that is to hand it to the far right. No, sure. Because you're legitimizing their position. You're saying, oh, these guys actually they have a point, and they're not toxic anymore because we're adopting exactly the same thing. So they're mainstream politics now, so you can vote for them with a clear conscience, and that's what people do. Yeah. Surprise, surprise, if they want to beat up immigrants, they don't vote Labour, they vote Reform. Yeah. It's utterly stupid and self-destructive and self-defeating, and perhaps more than anything else this government has done so far suggests this total sense of drift, a lack of knowing who you are. They haven't even identified themselves, let alone what they want to do. Yeah. And so what happens then is that you need scapegoats. If you're not solving people's problems, if you're presiding over continued decline, if you're insisting on continued austerity, then what are you going to do? What are you going to tell people? You can't tell them, yeah, sorry, we can't be bothered to solve your problems and we're just going to leave this as a fucked up country. No, you say, it's those people's fault over there. They're the ones to blame. And one of the rediscoveries of recent politics is that it doesn't matter what people's absolute position is so much as what their relative position is. And there's a very large tranche of people in any society who, even if you don't improve their conditions of life, if you can visibly and demonstrably beat up another group and say, look, you're better off than this group, they'll say, well, hey, that's a win for us, and they'll vote for you.
Mm-hmm. No, I 100% agree. I went to Prime Minister's Question Time for a radio show the other day, and I couldn't believe how much Starmer was, backing the reform thing. And you're absolutely right. No, if he's saying that, people aren't going to go, oh, we'll vote Labour. Then they'll go, well, we'll vote reform. You're not going to change. He has to kind of. I mean, it's so.
It's fundamentally stupid.
Like you, I didn't have high hopes, but I didn't think he would just, fold like that. And you can understand what he's thinking, but it's definitely wrong. Yes, well, there we go. We're nearly coming to an end. We'll see whether this. We've sort of possibly answered this, but this is from Anonymous. Where do we go from here? Is the question that maybe the.
Well, look. I think one of the fundamental problems that the left has had in the past is that our focus of political organisation was the workplace, and that's not in itself necessarily a problem, because that's how the labour movement and much else besides was built. It was built mostly in heavy industry, where as Marx and Engels pointed out, you're bringing together a whole load of working people in one place, and what are they going to do? They're going to come together to overthrow capital and improve their position, right? And that's it's been a very powerful political force. The trouble is that even at the height of that force, it was quite exclusive. So, for instance, at the height of industrialism in Britain, there were more women working in domestic service than there were men working in heavy industry. And those women had no voice if the locus of organisation was heavy industry. Mm-hmm. Huge numbers of other people had no voice. Farmhands and many other people, which are very large numbers, had no voice in that, artisans and the rest, because they weren't in those particular places. So they couldn't easily become part of that mobilisation. They had to be part of the industrialised workforce to be able to mobilise as an industrialised workforce. You can't do that on a large scale now today. We desperately need trade unions. We should seek to unionize all forms of work that we can, but it's become much, much harder with casualization, with fragmentation, all the rest of it. The whole gig economy, it's just much, much more difficult to do. But everyone, even if only briefly, lives in a particular place. We've all got a neighborhood. And those who live there longer can start to build a welcoming neighborhood, an inclusive neighborhood, based on the principles we outline of private sufficiency, public luxury. I don't have time to go into it in depth now, but we think we've landed on something which is a sort of organizing community principle, which can start to build genuine communities at your neighborhood level, which then can start to gain political power, based on these principles of devolving power to the smallest possible units, and then having deliberative participatory democracy there. And in doing so, we can start to develop not an entirely new form of political organizing, because it has been done in a few places around the world, and we mention a few and explain how that's happened. But we can build on those examples, but build something much bigger and more compelling than anyone has ever done before. And the great thing is, you start on your doorstep, organizing a meal for your neighbors, bringing people together around a few shared aims. Everyone likes to eat. The origin of the word, the etymology of the word companion, companes, with bread. You break bread together. It's very simple. And then you say, this patch of grass outside here, which is all covered in dog shit and the council's never done anything about. How can we make this better? What can we do here? Oh, there's a community right to buy now. It's just coming in. This is a useful tool. Maybe we could get together and buy some land and make it into the thing we want. And slowly you start to build community power. You start to give people something to belong to, a sense that there is something here to belong to, a sense that you belong to it and it belongs to you, a sense that you count, that you are held positively in the minds of others, that you've got people around you who will protect you from some of the worst in life, or at least with whom you can share some of the woes of life. Mm-hmm. You are not alone anymore. And that's the beginning of a new politics.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's very good. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. We're pretty much out of time as well. So you will be signing books afterwards, so people can come and see you signing books. We'll give George a round of applause in a second. As we're leaving out, just please stay in your seats, and then you can go. But ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the amazing George Monbiot. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.